Hello, everyone. This is Mrs. Kringle, and today we're going to talk about primary sources versus secondary sources and some databases that you can use to find some awesome primary sources for your research, particularly for history projects. Primary sources are sources that are created firsthand or at the time of the event. Secondary sources are created long after the event has occurred, usually by someone who has not lived that event. And so that's the real difference between primary and secondary sources. Primary are those sources that were made at the time. So, for example, if you were to interview me about surviving the San Francisco earthquake in 1989, that interview with me is a primary source because I survived it. Even if we create that interview right now in 2022, which was long after 1989, because I actually survived the event, that is considered a primary source. Okay, but if we were to read a newspaper article written in 2019 by somebody who had not lived that event, like let's say somebody who lived way over in New York is just writing about the anniversary of the earthquake, that would be considered a secondary source because it's created second or after the event. We're going to watch a little short 4-minute video here that defines the difference between primary and secondary sources. And then I'm going to show you on the TF-RAGS library page some great databases you can use to find some primary sources.
Primary means first, or first-hand. So think of primary sources as materials that are first-hand. They're connected to an historical event because they were created during the time of the event, or because they involve someone who participated firsthand. For example, if you're researching the civil rights movement in Minnesota, you might find primary sources related to Matthew Little, a Minneapolis civil rights activist who went to the March on Washington in 1963. Little listened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. deliver his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Little wrote notes and letters about that day, and someone took photos of Little at the march. Notes, letters, photos. These are all primary sources because they document Little's first-hand experiences with the civil rights movement. In your research, you might also find this oral history interview with civil rights activist Nellie Stone Johnson, which is also a primary source.
And these organizations all got together and formed a coalition.
Even though the interview was recorded after the civil rights movement, it's still a primary source because Johnson was involved firsthand in the movement. Other examples of primary sources include newspaper articles, autobiographies, maps, government records, art, and films. As long as the item is from the time you're researching or documents someone's first-hand experience, it's a primary source. Something else to remember, it doesn't matter if you're looking at the original primary source or a copy of the primary source. They are both primary sources. Secondary, of course, means after first. So secondary sources are materials created after a historical event. Let's say you're still researching the civil rights movement, and you're looking for information about Lena Olive Smith, Minnesota's first female African-American lawyer. This article about Smith was written by a law professor in 2001, well after the civil rights movement, so it's a secondary source. Here's a web page about Smith. It was created in 2014, so it's also a secondary source. Secondary sources include books, biographies, articles, dissertations, websites, and documentary films, as long as they were written about a person or historical event at a later time. Many secondary sources get their information from primary sources. Just look at the footnotes or bibliography at the end of the secondary source to see what primary sources were used. Let's test your knowledge. Here's a photocopy of the Minneapolis Spokesman newspaper from April 1968, soon after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Is this a primary or secondary source? It's a primary source because the newspaper is from the time of the assassination. Even though it's a photocopy and not the original paper itself, it's still a primary source. Here's a book about the civil rights movement, written by a history professor and published in 1990. Is it a primary or secondary source? It's a secondary source because it was written after the civil rights movement by someone who was not a first-hand participant. This is a book of letters written by Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. It was published in 2007. Is it a primary or secondary source? It's a primary source. Even though it was published in 2007, it contains copies of letters written by Robinson, a first-hand participant in the civil rights movement. Now that you know what primary and secondary sources are, have fun researching. And remember, if you need help, ask a librarian. You can call, email, or ask questions in person. Visit www.mnhs.org/library for more information.
I like that video because it gives you a nice distinction between primary and secondary sources. It also highlights the Minnesota Historical Society, which, while we are not in Minnesota, we are in Pierre, South Dakota, and we are so fortunate because we have here the South Dakota State Archives, which is similar to the Minnesota Historical Society in the fact that they collect and curate and make available to the public items related to South Dakota history. The archives are located at the Cultural Heritage Center here in Pierre, and they are open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So I highly encourage you to go up there and visit. They have awesome resources up there, primary sources that you can use. Now, we also have some resources on our library webpage that you can use to find primary sources. And so we're going to go over here to get to the library page. We need to go to schools, put our mouse over the word schools. You'll see the 5 schools in our district. We come down here to TF Riggs High School. You need that pop-up menu. You'll see TF Riggs Library right there. Once you click on TF Riggs Library, this is the home page. We're going to go right here where it says Riggs Research Resources. Now, I used to just have my databases over here listed under the South Dakota State Library databases in an alphabetical order, but I have gone to an awesome training this past summer, and I found out about so many more databases that my alphabetical list wasn't working anymore. So I've kind of divided things up a little bit. But I want to say that these South Dakota State Library databases are amazing places to start research rather than going to Google, because this information that's contained on these databases is vetted, it's cited, it's reliable. I don't have to question it. I don't have to second guess whether there's an authority writing this resource or not. So these databases that are listed under here are great. And the South Dakota State Library pays for the citizens of South Dakota to be able to use them. So I highly encourage you to make use of them. They have an awesome feature now called geolocating, meaning that when you are within the boundaries of the state of South Dakota, and you're on a local computer within those. So let's say you're here in Pierre, the computer, the database will recognize the fact that you are logging in from South Dakota and will allow you access to the databases. If you plan to travel outside of South Dakota, let's say you're going to go see family or you're going on a trip and you want to use the databases, come see me before you leave and I'll give you the barcode and password so you can access it, because the state library databases have to recognize you as a citizen in order to allow you access. And if you're here in South Dakota, no problem. If you travel outside of South Dakota, you'll need that barcode and password, and we can help you with that. Like I said, though, I found so many more awesome databases this year that I wanted to give you access to. So I've kind of arranged my page a little bit differently than how it was. I have set up some South Dakota State Library databases, and I've divided them up by what they're good for. So this first section right here are great search databases, general search databases, and they're a great place to start your research. So that's why they're all listed here. These are primarily, though, where you're going to find secondary sources, those articles and books that are written after the event has occurred. The next heading that we have a list of databases underneath is the ebook and reference book databases. Again, great places to find information, but mostly secondary sources. If we're looking for those primary sources or sources that were created at the time of the event, we need to come down to this heading right here that says primary sources. These databases right here contain only primary sources, sources that are created or were created at the time of the event. And I want to look at a couple of these. One that I want to look at today is called 19th Century U.S. Newspapers. If you are planning to do a topic from the 1800s from U.S. history, this is a great place to check out. This is just a collection of scanned US newspapers from the 19th century or the 1800s. I can start by going to browse if I want to, and that just brings up a list of all types of newspapers that they have here. So for example, if I wanted to come down here and find the Bismarck Tribune from Dakota Territory, I could do a click on that and I could see all these different articles and newspapers. So December 26, 1899, I can click on that. 5 killed and many injured, the Boer invasion. So here is just the newspaper from that day, which was December 26, 1899. You can see what was happening in Bismarck or what Bismarck was focusing on, okay? Now, and that can be difficult though. I mean, that's great if you're just browsing and trying to come up with a topic, but it can be difficult if you have a specific topic to just go to a newspaper and look through all the different issues. What I like to do is just go up here to where my search bar is, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to say I want to do the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth, and I do a search on John Wilkes Booth. I want you to notice how the database is trying to be helpful. It says, I see you're searching John Wilkes Booth. Do you mean Booth, John Wilkes? Yep, that's exactly what I mean. So I'm going to hit that or select that. Comes up with 995 results. But if I look through, I'm not really seeing, I'm looking for stuff on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and I'm really not seeing, I'm seeing amusements, classified advertisements. So what am I going to do? If I come up here, there's this awesome filter, and you can filter your results by person about. So if I click on there, comes up and looks at my results, and it says 82 of them are about John Wilkes Booth. 36 are about Edwin Booth. Edwin was the brother of John Wilkes. So if I want to do a search on both of them, I can select both of them, or what I'm really interested in is John Wilkes Booth. So hopefully if I do this, I'll get some better results. I'm going to hit apply. It's going to redo my search, and it now comes up with 82 results. So scroll down and see if we got anything better that looks more interesting. Here's one that says the president's murderer. It's from a newspaper called the Boston Daily Advertiser, published in Boston, Massachusetts. And it was published, this particular article appeared in the issue from Monday, April 17th, 1865. Well, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 15th, 1865. So this is definitely a primary source. And I want you to notice it comes up with the actual article itself. You can zoom in if you want to. Although for me, that's still that is a little bit hard for me to read. So I like to come over here where it says plain text. I'm going to hit that little check marks there. And here is the actual article text for this article called The President's Murderer. And it says, there seems now but little reason to doubt that the wretch whose name will be branded with everlasting infamy as the murderer of Abraham Lincoln was John Wilkes Booth, the actor. And it goes on to describe who John Wilkes Booth, talks about how he was the son of Junius Booth, who was an actor. All 5 of the kids went into acting, at least the 4 sons did. And there was also a daughter. Talks about how John Wilkes Booth was not the best of the 4 actors. It was actually Edwin Booth. But then it comes in to talk about John Wilkes Booth has played many engagements in the city, but was given to rant and mouthing and showed in his acting the coarseness of his nature. He is about 25 years of age and unmarried. He's strongly built and muscular. We have been informed that his character was far from good, and that although some of the members of his profession may at first have been friendly toward him on account of his family connections, his taste led him to seek the lowest company, and that his disavowed disloyalty has of late caused him to be shunned by his brother actors. And it goes on to talk about how Edwin actually kicked him out of the house for his treasonous language. I just love this writing and how descriptive it is and how much we get great information about John Wilkes Booth right here. Because this is a database, and what we love about databases is up here, it's cited. I can download it, I can print it, I can send it or email it to myself. But there's a cite button here. Here's this MLA citation for this article. Excuse me for that. My dog, Daisy, decided to make her presence known. This is the MLA citation for this article. You can see there are other citation styles, but we use MLA here at this school. So it's important, though, I always encourage you to visit with your teacher to make sure that this citation is correct. You can select it, copy and paste it, and put it in your Works Cited. So it's a great resource. I love if you're going to do anything in the 1800s and you want some primary sources or newspaper articles written about a topic from that time, this is great. What's really interesting here in this particular article too, there's actually an obituary for Abraham Lincoln here too. So that's really pretty interesting. So this 19th century U.S. newspapers is a great database from the South Dakota State Library that provides those full text articles from the 1800s, those primary sources. They also have another newspaper and magazine database that covers articles from the 1890s to 1982. So for getting primary sources for Abraham Lincoln's assassination, it's not going to really be helpful because Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865. But this particular database is great if you're going to do more contemporary historical topics. For example, the Civil Rights Movement, Watergate, the American Indian Movement. There's a lot of great information. This is a database that's produced by the company EBSCO. And so you can see here, just like with Gale, it's trying to be helpful. It says, I see you're searching Watergate. Are you looking for the scandal? Are you looking for the affair? I'm just going to go with searching Watergate right now. I'm going to do a search, and I get 1,275. Now, not all of these are full text. I need to come over here and click link to full text, and that will just bring back those articles that are full text. So 371 of these articles are full text, means I can look at the article right here. So that's a really great resource. So if I want to look, you can see that these are primary sources because they're coming from the time period of Watergate, 1973 and 1974. So for example, this one is called Scrambling to Break Clear of Watergate. It's from August 27, 1973 from Time Magazine. If I click on that, here's my abstract, and if I scroll down, here's my actual full text of that article. Over here on the right-hand side is my function keys. There's my print, my email, my save, my cite. I can send things. This is a great resource for you to use for looking for articles from 1890 to 1982. Now, just because, let's go back to our result list here. We had 371 that were full text. We had some that were not full text. Remember, we got 1,275. That doesn't mean we can't get those other articles that are not full text. So if you're interested in some of those articles that are not full text, bring me the abstract or the citation, and I will look to get that article for you from the state library. I want to go back and check out a couple of other databases that are not actual South Dakota State Library databases, but that are amazing for locating primary sources. This one right here, called the Digital Public Library of America, is an amazing research source of over 46 million images, texts, and videos from collections of libraries across the United States. So if I do a search on John Wilkes Booth, I come up with 381 results. And you can see, like, this first one right here is a photograph of John Wilkes Booth. This one right here is another photograph of him. And in fact, 141 of them, the images here, are actual images. 103 are text. But if I click on here in John Wilkes Booth, this is a picture of John Wilkes Booth. And it is actually from the Minnesota Historical Society. So that's pretty cool that that's been made available. I mean, look, imagine that you have access to 46 million items from libraries across the United States. That's just absolutely incredible. We also have the Digital Library of South Dakota, which is a new database that's been made available to the citizens of South Dakota. It's a collection from the libraries of the Board of Regents schools. You can see which schools there are participating. They've made available certain collections of theirs from their private collections, their library collections, and made it available for citizens of South Dakota to search. So that's pretty cool. And there's the state archives. You can search them online, or like here, they have all this information about the flood of Rapid City in 1972. So that's pretty interesting, just really interesting. And this is actually lots of different floods. So here's the Pier flood. So that's pretty cool. So it's showing you different floods that have happened in South Dakota. So that's really actually very cool. So this is all online, but they also have, we are so fortunate, like I said, the archives are located here in town. So you could go up there and get assistance from people who work up there. So these are just some of the databases available for primary sources. You can also scroll down further because it says see also specialized databases for history. So if I scroll down, I'll see that I'm looking now at specialized research databases. These are databases that are devoted specifically to certain topics. So if I scroll down here, here's one that's devoted to history. These are databases that are specifically about history and about primary sources. One of them, the three that I really enjoy, or the four actually, that are Gale, that are similar to what we looked at when we looked at 19th century newspapers, are these right here. Overland Journeys, Sources in U.S. History, this American Revolution, the Civil War, and Slavery in America. So let's go into the American Revolution. I can go up here and just search it like I did before. I can search within this collection, so just this particular collection. So let's do a search on George Washington. I get 180 monographs, okay? I can come over here. It looks like I'm doing pretty good in terms of finding information. I've got letters from George Washington. I've got pictures here of George Washington. So very cool, again, because this is a database. It's going to be cited. So we'll come in here and look at this particular one. These are the letters from General Washington to several of his friends. My cite button is up here, and there's my citation for that. So there's a lot of great resources on this TF-Rags library page for primary sources, and I hope you will take a look. And if you have any questions, come see me, come visit me in the library. I look forward to seeing you.